Hello, everybody. I'm Tom Vander Ark from Getting Smart. We're here talking about what I think is the most important topic in the world. That's creating smart cities, cities where everybody has access to high-quality education. We have a great panel to take on this topic. In addition to Paul LeBlanc from Southern New Hampshire, we have Connie Yowell, who leads LRNG. As you'll learn more about in this session, those two merged in what I think was the most interesting merger activity of 2018. And we're going to kick things off with a video that was produced by Rob English, our third panelist. It's a terrific video that I think exhibits the sort of learner-centered design that Rob has helped to bring to both of these organizations. So hit the video.
Do I do it or do you do it? I don't. Sorry, I'm not sure if I should cue it or with
the video
remote, or if you got. I should.
My name is Kyrie Mosley, and I'm 18 years old. I have this big deal with complacency and being okay with complacency. I'm just really for impacting my community. I really want to help people. I just know what a young me would have wanted, and I just want to wake up every day being the person that I needed as a kid. There's so many young creatives that are minorities that have a lot to give to the world, but they just don't have the resources that they need. I want my career to just be a job. I want it to be what I love, and I want it to be a part of my lifestyle.
We're on video.
So, I'm Paul LeBlanc. When we think about the work of LRNG, which now serves over 55,000 low-income youth, about 14 communities, 14 cities, 14, it's always growing with Connie,
Yeah.
14 cities, overwhelmingly students of color. The message that we've been hearing again and again is, I love learning, I hate school. And when we ask people what they want to do, that question that adults should stop asking and ask them instead, what inspires you? What inspires them is design, creativity, and the last thing they want to do is work in jobs that look like many of ours. They don't want to work in offices. They want to own their work and their passion and their projects in a very different way. So at Southern New Hampshire University, as we're thinking about how do we reach upstream to young people earlier than universities typically do, and we start to break that, sort of think about that pipeline differently, we start asking questions about how do young people want to learn. We, generally speaking, design learning for the way we've learned, the way we like to learn. So we love the work that Rob and his team has done, the creative work they've done in thinking about the design of learning. We love the work that Connie, who was at the MacArthur Foundation for years before she created LRNG, is thinking about how to reach students and engage them. And I think, Connie, if you want to just walk a little bit through the city approach that we're now taking together, I'll sort of cycle back with you.
That sounds good. Thank you, and thanks for being here, folks. One of the places where we wanted to start today's conversation is to really talk about the challenges that we face and the ways in which we think about both coming from a learner-centric, youth-centric perspective, but understanding that our young people live in communities and they live in cities, and that we've got to do our work beginning with where they are. And what we see as the challenge for them is a challenge around engagement, a challenge around employment, and a challenge around equity. And that's really, so where we start always with our work when we begin to take on those challenges, and that's why we started with the video today, is that we always start with young people. And so that we are not designing for them, but we are designing with them. And that's really sort of what's at the heart of our merger with SNHU, is that we are really after building the kind of tool and learning ecosystem that allows our cities to become learning ecosystems. And so part of what we see in the work that we do is that when you listen to young folks like Kyrie and others, we know that the most engaging learning happens when we can bring together a young person with their interest and their passion, connect them to a community of mentors and peers and teachers that can help them get better at that passion, and then connect it to real-world opportunity. My slide moved a little bit more quickly than I do in my speaking. Part of the challenge that we've seen in all of our work is that those three things exist in different places in our cities, right? That young people often pursue their interests in community-based organizations, online and informal conversations and in communities. They build their competencies in school. Real-world impact happens at work or in the workplace. And part of where inequality lives is in the fragmentation of our systems, right? So that heroic teaching and good pedagogy happens when we can bring those three things together, and yet our cities are designed to be siloed and fragmented. And so part of what we're trying to do with our merger is really think about the tools and the ecosystem and the infrastructure that allows us to bring the workforce together with learning, with youth, and the communities in which they live. So how do we do that? What are the tools that we bring to that conversation? So we start with a platform, our LRNG platform, that really creates the opportunity to think about learning in the siloed systems, to knit them together through an infrastructure that we call playlists. And our playlists are organized to be able to take learning, whether it's happening online or offline, to organize it in a thematic way, and then to enable those themes as young people move through the playlist to level up, to earn badges, and unlock new opportunities. So the way that that gets manifest in a city is that we might work with any of these organizations, a high school, youth that are not in a community but are online, with community-based organizations, with public agencies like our public schools or our libraries. They then are able, through our badges and our infrastructure, to start connecting to learning opportunities that may happen or exist anywhere. So for example, what you see here is a set of projects that we did in Chicago with Apple. And part of what we did with Apple and a whole set of community-based organizations across the city was to say, Apple came in and said, we want our young people to be able to code for mobile phones in Swift. And the community-based organizations in Chicago said, that's great, but we don't have anybody to teach that. And by the way, what happens if they do learn how to code in Swift? Do you have jobs for them? So we started at the very beginning, went to a set of community-based organizations, and they said, well, you know, most of our kids don't really care about coding, but what they care about is making their community better. So we designed a set of playlists with them for them to implement all around design and solving community-based problems. We used Best Buy and other companies to work with on that. And then those badges got unlocked once a young person could identify a core problem, design a prototype around how they wanted to solve that. They could unlock the opportunity for they would earn a set of badges and then unlock the opportunity to learn Swift coding. And a completely different set of programs, those badges, because we're a learning and development platform in Chicago for summer youth employment, then unlocked a whole set of jobs over the summer in which they could use their Swift coding, but then continue to learn more career readiness skills, earn a set of badges around career readiness, and then move on. And this is where we got stuck as we started going through this in Chicago, which is we could get young people the beginnings of how to learn around career readiness. We connected those to the workforce. We could get them into learning how to code with Swift. But then what happens after that? And it was at that point that we merged with SNHU to begin to think about, well, how does this connect actually to unlocking real jobs and unlocking college credit? And so really started to work with Paul in southern New Hampshire around what is the future of post-secondary as well.
Right, so in the third box that you see, students start now to scaffold those badges, and we've completed the process, actually, of taking all of LRNG's many badges and mapping credits to all of those that are college learning level, college credit worthy. So now all of a sudden in that middle box, you have students who are doing college level work, earning badges, earning college credits that can scaffold into that third box where we can plug them into either a competency-based degree program or courses to continue to build towards a degree. But the notion here being that students are unlocking opportunities for work, in some cases for the very first time, and it may be that that's good for a year, till a supervisor or manager taps them on the shoulder and says, hey Rob, you're really good at this, I can make you an assistant manager if only, and then we are there in box 3 to help with the if only. So you start to move into earn while you learn models, And then we start to partner with community-based organizations. And really, the model we've had for a long time is to sort of end higher ed's monopoly on the ability to teach students in a sort of higher and post-secondary education. So we want to be able to go in and work with a Peloton University, for example, in Texas, working with DACA students, to be able to give those students a college opportunity that doesn't require them to enroll directly into our programs. So in some ways, it's not white labeling, but it's a movement through our community-based partners. We do the same with Duet in Boston, serving inner city communities, or GEVS, which is the Jewish Educational Vocational Services of Philadelphia. So again, the idea for a long time for us has been with our CB program to bring higher education out into communities as opposed to forcing people in communities to leave them to come to us. And all of this scaffolded and coherent in the platform. Do you want me to continue?
Yeah, go.
So this led to this notion of building an ecosystem, and the level of granularity we've chosen is the city, where we go in, as Connie described, do the research with the workforce needs of that particular city under the convening power, not always, but usually and preferably through the mayor's office, be able to bring employers to the table, back map pathways to work, solving the talent pipeline needs of that set of employers. And then we start to leverage underused municipal resources like libraries. So we're piloting right now in Birmingham, Chicago, and New Orleans. In Birmingham, we're looking at co-locating a SNHU LRNG facility in the library itself. So this becomes sort of a we work for education, a place where young people can come, whether it's to escape the noise and crowdedness of an apartment, or to get access to a decent computer, or to get tutorial help, or to get counseling on a FAFSA, whatever they need. So a multi-purpose space that's cool. We're also going to talk a little bit about, we leverage culture and popular culture in a very diligent way, which I think higher ed often sort of looks down their nose at. We want to actually go the other way and embrace this as a form and an atmosphere of engagement. We will work with schools in many instances, and I will say, if you hear a note of hesitation, it's only the caveat that every city is very different. And it's really going in early on to understand the landscape and do the research. So I talked about the research that looks at workforce needs. We're also doing the research that tells us what CBOs are going to be most effective in supporting the work. We're also going to look at what the state of the schools are. We always want to be a complement and never in competition. Some schools will be involved more directly, as they are in New Orleans. Some schools perhaps less. We bring, as it says, you see employers, and then mentors become really critically important, and using the platform, and Connie can talk more about this multi-sided platform that allows us to bring peers together with practitioners. But all of that building a scaffolded, coherent city ecosystem that combines both the technology platform, the learning at every level of granularity you heard me describe before, with the input and sort of buy-in of the employer. And I say again and again, the two things that I love about what Connie and her team have done at LRNG is youth-inspired design, which you'll see if you go to the LRNG.org website, it looks like Spotify. They don't talk about program and curriculum, they talk about playlists, because young people think about playlists. They allow young people to curate their own playlists. So not just the playlists we curate with employers, but giving them empowerment in their learning. I think that's sort of just so beautifully done. And then this notion that badges always have to unlock opportunity. When we ask young people, particularly young people who have lived in communities of scarcity, not scarcity of talent or opportunity or a love of learning, but a scarcity of resources, they often, we ask them often when we think about traditional college for a long deferred payoff. Go to college for 2 years, get your associate, and then maybe good things will happen. Really giving them those sort of payoffs much earlier on, and those wins that scaffolded engagement is really critical. So I love, for example, when you talked about Swift coding and they do that, they have to build an app that solves a problem in their community. When that app goes into the App Store, it unlocks something, a list of every employer in the area that Apple works with that needs Swift coders. Now what is that unlocked? It's unlocked access with demonstrable evidence of mastery.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So I just want to underscore what I think is the cool thing about this this new merger. It, for me, is a new and innovative pathway from disconnected youth and working adults that may have accumulated some credits but are out of school and didn't have hope of getting a degree. And it creates valuable and interesting learning experiences for them that open successive opportunities and then have the potential to stack into college credit. So this bridge from being disconnected to unlocking opportunity to begin earning credit, to me is really promising. Rob, you've had a chance to work with both organizations, and I'd love just some insights on how you've helped both of these organizations start with the learner in mind.
Yeah, where I would love to start is more just taking a step back and saying who I am and who this weird guy on the stage is, because I think it's relevant to the question that you're asking. So I am a creative director. I do a lot of work with music artists. In the past I've worked with a myriad of artists: Lady Gaga, John Mayer, Meghan Trainor, Lindsey Sterling, John Legend, to name a few. And I have spent my career in advertising and creative direction and marketing for artists and entertainment, really about moving culture and trying to amplify messages to reach people and mass audiences in an impactful way. My history has been more so to do this for things that are less important, like selling sneakers or ketchup and vitamin water and things of that nature. But I had the pleasure of working with the LRNG team and doing this for, what I like to say is like using those superpowers for good, and being able to reach some of the more elusive audiences like young people, especially young people from the communities that are from communities like where I come from. So I similar to the last group that was here, I am from the south side of Chicago. I know what it's like to grow up, surrounded by violence, surrounded by a lack of opportunity, and really finding your way out of that is extremely difficult. In that respect, I am extremely lucky. And that being said, in doing this work, like one of the things that I really know is that the only way to reach these kids is to something that we've talked about, we're talking about literally going to them in their communities, but also I think it's, going to them in their culture. There's one thing about, speaking to people or speaking at an audience, and it's a very different thing than actually, walking to and reaching out to an audience with respect. So if we're actually trying to embed this idea that learning isn't just something that happens inside of a classroom, that is something that can happen anywhere, in a community, in a city, and it's something that has to be a part of their lifestyle, then we need to be able to present learning as a lifestyle. So this has gone into a lot of how we've designed the brand, from the naming to the logo to the aesthetic, the brand architecture. Everything about LRNG has the DNA of things that I and my team have put into working on sneaker brands, to music artist rollouts, to everything else, to video game design, because we want, when these young people encounter this, they need to begin to see this as something that is closely connected to the things that they care deeply about, and that we speak to them in a way that's respectful and that understands them, as we're trying to open their minds to this new world that LRNG is potentially promising.
So Connie, in addition to trying to figure out how these two systems come together, you've also made this interesting decision to try to focus a lot of your work in a handful of cities.
Yeah.
Maybe you could talk about why Birmingham, why Chicago, how'd you pick those, and what do you hope to accomplish there?
Yeah, so we're piloting this year in 3 cities, Birmingham, Chicago, and New Orleans, as you mentioned. And part of what we're trying to do, Paul opened by saying we are in about 14 or 15 cities. And in doing those initial 14 or 15 cities, we were going in as LRNG, working in a when I say ecosystem, I think about the ecosystem for 14 to 18 or 19-year-olds, and really thinking about in and out of school and connecting summer youth employment and building out those pathways. With the merger with SNHU, we now are also connecting two ecosystems. So we are connecting the worlds of the 14, 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old with the adult learning post-secondary opportunities. And so we wanted to take a step back and think about 3 cities where we could bring both of those tool sets in, as a single ecosystem to work with them.
It is kind of a cool, when we think about that connection, we've always thought about AP classes or dual enrollment, but this creates a whole new way to begin to access post-secondary learning. Yeah,
so we think that at the end of the day, we are redefining what dual enrollment or concurrent enrollment looks like. So in a couple of weeks, and I'm looking at the president of the global campus for SNHU as I say this, We're going to be able to start talking about a whole set of badges that have been earned in summer youth employment, in libraries, in the out-of-school space that count for college credit.
Yeah.
As soon as we do that, we have broken, in many respects, the monopoly of schools on counting what matters for learning. And we have opened up the possibility of really delivering and connecting with young people wherever they are, because we now are going to have a much more flexible and fluid and dynamic opportunity to engage them. And we think that that one thing, which is the first thing that's coming out of our merger, but many other things are going to come out of it, has the opportunity to dynamically change what learning looks like in our cities.
That's exciting. Paul, anything you want to add about the mechanics of this combination?
The ecosystem slide, the final one.
I'll give it a shot.
See if we can just find this one.
Yeah, sorry, I apologize for the slides. This is a little bit of what the platform
So what Connie
looks
finds
like.
out, really, if, I don't want this to sound immodest in any way, but we're really trying to think about this in a way that disrupts our own organization and disrupts higher ed, at least the piece of it that we inhabit. My feeling at this place in this long career in higher education is that most institutions are built around themselves and not students, to be honest with you. And what we're trying to do is, if you think about, and if I can use the analogy, and I don't use healthcare in America as an analogy for many good things, but in some ways universities, like big city hospitals, were big factories where you could go and get everything you needed at that place. And what have we seen in healthcare is a devolution of the hospital into urgent care, minute clinics, community-based health, right? And we've seen them sort of pushing out to the edges where healthcare can happen, telemedicine. In some ways, we're trying to do this with our institution to push ourselves out into the communities we serve and to stop building institutions or a version of higher ed in which we ask students to pass muster and be welcomed in to conform to us, but rather, as Rob suggests, to start with where they are, with their passions, with the way they want to learn, and bring education to them in a way that's much more personalized, it's much more customized to what they need and in the ways they need it. So this is a sort of slide that I sketched out, and you'll see my lack of sort of design. I'm embarrassed that Rob's sitting next to me, but when we think about this, this is this improbable friendship with this like older gray-haired white guy and the coolest person I know, but we become good buddies, and then he has to cringe through this. But when we think about this, it's really learner at the center. And as we sort of reach upstream to pre-college, that LRNG, that we start to break down that barrier. So pre-college doesn't mean non-college. Pre-college means we are as comfortable serving an 11th grader working on her associate's degree, and that's not a problem for us. And if we reach downstream into the workforce, we're as comfortable with a 65-year-old formerly incarcerated adult now getting his or her high school degree. And what we want to build is we want to break the sequence. We want to break the traditional limits of the university. We want to put students at the center of that. And we want to move away from the one-size-fits-all industrial age model of the university to one that's really personalized in the way that we've become accustomed to almost every aspect of our life. Rob certainly mentioned retail, for example, but if you take a look at what's going on now with precision medicine, if you're taking a look at what's going on now with genetic mapping and treatments, you're seeing highly personalized approaches to medicine. We should be able to do this with education as well, and that's what we're really trying to build. So if you look at this is LRNG, Da Vinci, IDEO, Duet, Concourse. These are all high school partners based in the community. Rise High is not there, but with Rise High, we're bringing education to playgrounds in South Central, where we're serving and working with homeless kids and kids that have timed out of the foster care system. We're not asking them to go online. We're not asking them to come to a campus. We are going to where they live and work. If you take a look at New Orleans and Chicago and Birmingham, these are our first attempts to build an ecosystem play. And it's a recognition that when you take regional or statewide plays, you fail to recognize that there's a great deal of difference in the workforce needs, the culture, and the community of Birmingham than there is in Mobile. So we think that's the right level of granularity. To the right, we still have a traditional campus. We have College for America, our CBE program. Global campuses are online. GEM, that's our we don't not name anything modestly at SNHU, so forgive me. That's our global education movement, but this is the most ambitious attempt to bring full degree programs to refugees. So we're in Kenya, Malawi, South Africa, Lebanon, and Rwanda with full degree programs with an amazing team with a goal of getting to 50,000 refugees. Workforce partnerships we're doing work with our employers and a big military presence. So you start to think about a university outside of the traditional strict boundaries to really stretch the definition of university to be a learning platform. And in our vision, we imagine learners will dip in and out of that learning ecosystem over the course of a longer life. And it means that we're able to deliver just the right amount of education at just the right time in just the right way. Sometimes a badge, sometimes a degree, sometimes 6 months, sometimes 20 minutes on a phone. That's the university we're trying to build.
How many of you are involved in out-of-school learning? Maybe informal learning? All right, let's pick a couple and do a really quick little design thinking exercise, and we'll put Paul and Connie to the test and think about how those experiences might translate into a degree pathway. Leah, you do a bunch of out-of-school learning in LA. Jump over here so we're not standing right next to that, but maybe you could describe what kind of learning experiences you might create, and then we'll talk about how we might turn those into a pathway.
So we build maker spaces, so we have kids we fill them with random material, manufacturers cast-offs mostly. So one of the things we do is when we're trying to teach sound, how sound is transferred, we have them build a headset. We call it Beats by Me, hoping Dre will.
Cool. So what ages?
So we've
You
done
have
that
some-
with 8-year-olds.
But you go up to high school, to college?
A high school, like an AP physics.
And the organization is Two-Bit Circus
Foundation.
in LA?
Yes.
All right. So Connie, if you're working with an employer like that, how could you turn a series of maker experiences into badges? And then maybe Paul, how might that stack into credits?
Yep, so a couple of things. First is we want to make sure that the young folks in LA can find you, and that it's not just parents with privilege that are figuring out where you are and getting their kids there. So we would work with Rob's team and make sure that there's a very engaging and visual presence for your program itself that's present on our site, and that can be connected to the social media and the things that they are participating in so that they can find it. The second thing is we would then work with you to make sure, so part of a playlist would be your physical programs. And so part of them sort of seeing it on their mobile phone, which is what LRNG is that they would then know to go to your program. We would then work with you to think about what are the competencies that those young folks are learning during your program, and how do they demonstrate those? So often in Make, it's taking a picture of something that they've made that can then be uploaded and be turned into a badge. One of the core things that I've often worried about Make is young people go to a single program, it's incredible, they get totally inspired. What do they do next? And so part of the playlist pathway is connecting them so they've learned how to solder, or they've learned a couple of core things. Then the next playlist is going to be about what is that next thing that they should do in relation to creating something. We would have a badge that would unlock that, and then start connecting that to some of the advanced manufacturing, some of the design, some of the could be related to technology or computer science that would sort of build on that first Make experience, and then turn to SNHU to help us think about credits for that.
And at some point, that work, as they grade up, is going to start to be credit worthy. We will have pre-mapped that. In the ideal world, there's a point when a student looks up and says, wow, I'm sort of 10 credits on my way to X, right? And that X might be a micro-credential, and 3 of those micro-credentials may add up to an associate's degree.
Right.
Or the other thing is, if you're talking about 13 or 14-year-olds, it may be that the badge is unlocking the opportunity to showcase what they've created for their local community. So we're thinking really hard about redefining this notion of what an opportunity is from the perspective of the learner, making sure that it's tightly connected to when the learning happens so that it's motivating and can unlock the next thing that they want to do. Or it could be that they get to meet a mentor like Rob and have them get feedback on what they're doing, which we also find our young people will kill for.
The one thing I want to underline that's happening in this process is we spend a lot of time talking to the target, like talking to this audience, and one of the things that, as we said earlier, that resonates is this notion that they love to learn, but they hate school. in that they don't want to be told to do something without having a complete understanding of why they're doing it. What are the connections? Where does it go? So like what you're doing and how we would love to like amplify that within LRNG is just being able to really draw the connections between the action of the building and doing the making experience and how it connects to real life work experiences. So they see themselves as someone that is involved in actually being somewhat, could be potentially entrepreneurial, to be, making that, so it's not just something that's done for a grade, it's not just something that is done for a requirement without purpose, it's something that's deeply and innately connected to something that they're driven by.
All right, let me grab one more example. Who else does out-of-school learning? Did you raise your hand back there? Shout it out. What do you do?
Sure. So we run Vex Robotics firms, and a big piece of that.
Vex Robotics?
Vex Robotics.
Great.
So what we've done probably over the last 7 to 8 years is created community-based groups for students that could not even make their school team or did not have the resources.
Okay. So expanding access to Vex Robotics, even outside of school environments?
Yep.
Connect that to something that leads to a next step.
Yep.
Great.
Struggle with that next.
Great. So that's similar, but let's talk specifically about robotics. Does that cue anything for you, Connie?
Sure, we work with robotics programs often to sort of both be able, let me back up and say, part of what I think the educational system really struggles with, particularly in project-based maker kinds of communities, is being able to identify what learning happens when they're building. And so part of it is really working with you all to make it granular so that they're earning badges along the way that really speak to the adult audience that's receiving those, to say this is the learning that happened here, so that the young person gets to continue to be in the learner, gets to be continued to be engaged in the project, but we can break the project down into granular bits around with the badges to show what learning has happened. And then we can level them up and stack them in a way that can relate to credit or to opportunity and to what happens next.
And I think we've really not talked about this, but Greg's team, Greg is president of our global campus, our online operation, is in a multi-year, this is our holy grail, it's wonky, and for some people like, well, why is this important? But they are mapping competencies to every single course, every form of learning that we have. When that library of competencies is completed, we'll be able to pull in learning wherever we can map a competency to it. So we want to end the monopoly of credits only going to that which is in a course catalog, and to be able to recognize that in a traditional setting on the main campus, the young 19-year-old who is the student government treasurer and manages a $2 million student activity fee, if she's doing her job well, there are genuine competencies that the workplace values. Can we know it? Can we assess it? Can we stand behind that with rigor and say, that's worth 2 or 3 credits, right? And you start to think, so we do this a little bit, right? ACE does it with military. We do with PLA. It's really to widen the scope of that. Much more
All right,
dramatic.
we've got about 5 minutes left. These guys are pretty early in figuring this stuff out, but I think they'll take a shot at a few hard questions. So what questions does this cue for you? Yeah.
You talked about sometimes getting support from mayor's office in the cities that you're present. What does that look like, and what do you do if the local government support is not there?
Great question. Connie, you want to start on that one?
Yeah, so the mayor's office engagement can look at a variety of different ways. So in Birmingham, we are sitting within the mayor's office, and they are putting together their strategic plan about how they want to build career pathways that are connecting schools to summer youth employment, to out-of-school programs, to apprenticeships, and to college. We are on the journey with them and co-designing and building them and integrating the pathways and the badges into all of that. We're in some cities, many cities, some mayors don't have that much control. And so what we do is that we may work with the largest nonprofit organization that wants to work with us to begin to move it out. We may work with the library system as a way to begin to sort of bridge and map across all of the organizations.
Connie, let me jump in and add that one example would be job skills.
Yep.
So you would work with the mayor's office, they would work with the business community to identify internships or paid employment opportunities, but to gain access to those, you'd have to earn a job-ready badge on LRNG,
Yep.
and that would unlock the employment opportunity. So that
Yep.
that's one way that they've worked
Yeah.
with 10 cities in the
Yeah,
past.
a nice example of what we're doing, the first thing we did in Chicago, 30,000 young people participate in Chicago's Summer Youth Employment Program. Most of those young people didn't know how to bank their checks.
Right.
And we're not saving any money. And so we created a playlist called Payday Ready that all of the young people in Chicago have to complete, which is around financial literacy and learning how to open a savings account. They can't get their first check until they finish that. So the badge unlocks the
Right.
paycheck.
So the badges are really
Yeah.
to get your act together for
Yeah,
employment.
and what we saw was
All
an
right.
85% increase in the number of kids
quick
opening
question,
checking
Connie.
accounts.
David?
Yep.
Thank you for your work and for spending your time with us today. Just a question about your thoughts of measuring impact and outcome, how you're capturing that and the ability to show this value and ROI to future cities as you grow. Be helpful.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank
Sure.
you, David.
Sure, I'll start and then if you guys want to add in. So the first thing that we are looking at just at its simplest is knowledge change and behavior change. So we actually think it's a huge impact to be able to see that kids are actually opening up their savings accounts. Right, and so we are looking, because we can connect learning to opportunity, we're looking to be able to measure behavior change. At the end of the day, our goal is that we are putting our young adult and adult learners on paths to upward social mobility. And so we both need to see them earning credentials, we need to see them earning increased wages, but we also need to sort of map the behavior changes that get them in the position to be able to do that. And so we have leading indicators plus outcomes.
Yep, and then we'll be looking at continuation into post-secondary. There are a whole host of these sort of more conventional city metrics. And we were saying today that, how many of you were sitting in the last session with Arnie in that panel? So we're working with Iman, we're working with Arnie's folks as well, and we had a conversation with Arnie today about our need to start to get at some more indelible sort of things, like trauma-informed education is something I think we're just starting to get our handle on, but you heard in that panel, those of you who were here, so much about trauma and pain. And I don't know how, there are things that we're early in this work, as Tom said, but we're really trying to get a handle on a more holistic read of what success looks like, as opposed to our fixation, an important fixation with just jobs. I mean, that's the difference maker for our students.
Yep.
But it's so much more than that.
Yeah, and I'll just add one more thing because I think it's so critical, and it's why Rob is up here with us, is that if we have not gotten a handle on how to ensure sustained engagement in learning, we're not creating lifelong learners. And that's really on us in terms of how we design and what our design looks like. So we're trying to be as rigorous as possible in all of those measures around engagement, return time, the amount of time that they're spending learning. All of those things actually deeply matter because it means we got our design right.
Rob, I'm curious. You could be working on a lot of different projects. Like, why this project, and what kind of outcomes do you hope to see?
I am working on a lot of different projects. I would say, like, what drives me in this work is, you know, oddly enough, I'm a product of a very similar system to LRNG. It's just a lot smaller. It's what it looks like typically when, you know, you've got like a great community organization and you're able to affect the lives of a few, you know, standout kids. I was like one of those, you know, maybe 10 kids that was actually able to have their lives transformed by a community organization and an opportunity that led to a career path, right? I'm involved with this work because I believe that this work can not only affect the lives of a few kids, it can affect the lives of millions of kids. And this is, you know, I mentioned I do creative direction for John Legend, who actually introduced me into social impact space. I've talked to a lot of education, you know, companies and people with great, you know, with great intentions on transforming the future of learning. But this is one of the few projects that I felt like really had a tangible grasp on the idea that could be scalable, that could touch the lives of a lot of kids in an impactful way. So that's the main reason why I, to this day, and we co-founded it and have spent as much time as I do on it, because I sincerely believe that this actually, what's at the core of the model and the idea will work if we're able to execute it properly.
I'd
Yeah.
say something else, Tom, if I might, about the work Rob's leading and the work generally. In these places that are incredibly challenging, so if Connie could describe to you, she's visited Iman, where Billy and the guys on that panel work. These are incredibly challenging places. The work with our refugee population is incredibly challenging places. They're forcing us to be inventive and creative in ways that traditional settings don't demand of us.
Right.
But that ability to bring it back into the mainstream. So I'm willing to wager that the design work that Connie and Rob's teams are doing for the youth of Birmingham will be incredibly engaging to the 19-year-old on my traditional campus. Right? We in Kigali have stood up an assessment center because we know that to educate 50,000 refugees, we really have to drive down the cost of delivery. So we've driven down the cost of assessment by 60%. That assessment center is now working in a pilot with Connie's students in the US.
In Chicago.
Right? So we start to drive down, our big hairy goal is to get the cost of delivery down to $100 a month. If we can do $100 a month, we can remove the financial burden. But that's only the table stakes for the kind of engagement and unlocking of opportunity that this is really about.
So Tom, I just wanted to add one last thing if
It
I
has
can.
to be quick.
Okay. So it's about this notion of scale that Rob was talking about. So if you look at this ecosystem, you'll see a bunch of programs off on the Da Vinci, the IDEAU, et cetera. We are about helping the programs that exist in the cities do extraordinary work. Right? We're not there to supplant in any way. The idea is that, I'm a former funder. I was the director of education at the MacArthur Foundation for 15 years. I'd encounter a community-based organization or a school that was doing great work and then want to give them more money in order to scale. Right? Every funder does that over and over again. It is impossible, and it is an impossible ask, and it takes the folks away from doing great work with young people to have to figure out how to scale. What SNHU and this partnership and more mergers need to do is bring an infrastructure to you all that are doing extraordinary work to enable you to do your work well, and we can manage the scale. And that's really what we're after in so many ways.
It's exciting and important work. Join me in thanking our panelists.